Cristiano Ronaldo, vai embora Cristiano Ronaldo, mete, bateu, golo.
Balotelli, Aguero!
Posse de bola para Portugal, vai Éder, chuta!
Hello everyone and be very much welcome to another episode of Europa Panenka or Panenka's Europe, a mini-series inside our podcast Os Panenka from the project Setenta Oito. Today we are here with Dan Pezzotta from the Atalanta Pod, and he is a fan from Atalanta, obviously the team that Sporting will face tomorrow to the Europa League knockout phase group. Yeah. So my English is already very bad. I'm so sorry, Dan. I'm mumbling a bit. Please, Dan, tell me a bit about yourself, about your experience living in the USA as a Atalanta fan, and now did you start your project?
Well, thanks, João. I can assure you that your English is much better than my Portuguese, so don't worry about that. But it's a pleasure to be on here to talk about Atalanta. Yeah, I mean, the story is, for those of you who hear my last name, Pezzotta, that is, it's definitely Italian. And for those in Italy, when they see that last name, they know that that's from a specific region of Italy up north in Lombardy, particularly Bergamo, where Atalanta is from. So even though I grew up overseas, I actually was born in the Philippines. My mother is Filipina, but my father is from Bergamo, where Atalanta is from. So I grew up in the Philippines and the U.S., where I live currently. I'm from Las Vegas. So, anybody who supports a football club, sometimes there's a choice, but sometimes there's no choice. And for me, my father was from Bergamo and was an Atalantino. So I also am an Atalantino. So my whole life I've spent supporting the club. So yes, very long-suffering supporter of Atalanta. So not too crazy, but yeah, we don't find too many of us in the U.S.
Okay, and please, how do you, first of all, do the games very much alter your schedule because of the 8-hour difference?
Yeah, sometimes, sometimes when we have the very early matches, they are 3:30 in the morning here in the west of the United States. So sometimes I don't even sleep. I just stay up to watch the game and then and then I go to bed afterwards. Good thing Las Vegas is a very late night, so you're used to staying up late. But yeah, it's something that I've actually grown quite accustomed to. So it's actually strange for me to watch a football match, a European football match, particularly Atalanta, in the afternoon or in the evening. I'm just used to it being part of my morning routine after all these years.
Okay, that's very interesting. And please tell me a bit about your project, Atalanta Pod.
Yeah, it's a pod that's been going around 5 seasons right now. We're on a little bit of a pause as myself and my partner Nick, who's also American, who lives on the East Coast of the United States, he has a new child, and I've been changing work, so it's a little bit on a pause, but it has been 5 years. We are the only English language podcast for Atalanta. It was actually started by myself and an English person 5 years ago, and Nick took over a couple years ago from our friend Nige, who runs a very good Atalanta site as well. But yeah, it's mostly, there was a very big lack of content for Atalanta in English, and there is a very big community of English-speaking Atalanta fans. Of course, Atalanta hasn't had the kind of success that teams like Sporting have had over the years. We're a very small club from a small city. But as you become successful, especially within the last 7 years, our best time of our 108-year history, sorry, much longer than that, 1907, I can't even do math, 116-year history almost this month, you get more fans and people start to become interested, especially because of the style of football they played or do play. So we felt like we needed to have a bit of an English voice and an English perspective to Atalanta coverage, to cover the team that we all love. So that's really what the project is about. It's a weekly podcast. We talk about the game. We talk about tactics. We have a little bit of fun. But it's just so there's some English content to consume for our English-speaking fans and for just non-Italian-speaking fans in general.
Okay. So before we go much deeper into Atalanta as a team, I wanted to ask you, what do you know about Sporting Clube Portugal and about Portuguese football in general?
Well, I wish, honestly, João, that I was able to watch more of the Primeira Liga. But what I know of Sporting is that there's the three big clubs, Sporting, Porto, and Benfica, of course. And, you know, I know that they have been quite good this season. I did watch the Europa League match against Sturm Graz. One of the things that I know, and I actually really like Ruben Amorim, their coach, when you look at the way that he sets his team up and the way that they play, very much like Atalanta played probably about 3-4 years ago at the height of their rise. We don't really play like that anymore, but it's exciting football. It's attacking football, beautiful 3-4-3. Yeah, and they've started off the season well. It doesn't look like, other than Braga, they've really played super strong teams in the league. But it was an impressive win against a tough Sturm Graz team away in Austria. We don't get a ton of Primeira Liga coverage here in the US. I would love to watch more. But yeah, I mean, you can't say Sporting. It's a great club. It's one of the three great clubs of the greatest clubs in Portugal. So I mean, nobody who is a football fan doesn't know about Sporting Club. So.
Okay. So now into Atalanta. So as you said, in the last 7 years, Atalanta turned to a much better page that during the 2018-19, 2020 seasons was better, I think. And here in Portugal, we also were very excited about the style of football that Atalanta was playing, about some players, Ilicic, Papu Gomez, Muriel, the usual. And one player that also brings much attention here to Portugal is Martin de Roon, much by his presence off the field and on the field. That he's a very funny guy for what we can tell, not knowing him.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to ask you, what is the current situation? Because we know that some of the players, the big stars have left, I think, but the coach stays the same. So I wanted to ask you, what is your current situation?
The current situation is, I think that 2 seasons ago, when we didn't qualify for Europe, was the start of kind of a rebuild. You talked about some of our great players, Papu Gomez, Josip Ilicic. Duvan Zapata was the last one to leave. He actually left for Torino. And when we had that front three, you know, whenever you say Josip Ilicic and Papu Gomez and Duvan Zapata, it's one of those things that we just have memories and, you know, heart emojis. Just unbelievable players who were almost unknown until they came to Atalanta and created that style. Our coach, Gianpiero Gasperini, like you said, has remained the same. 7 seasons, going on 8 seasons now. The longest serving coach of Atalanta's history. Brought all that success. And so much of what we do is based on having the right players, right? A good coach has his tactics and his style. I don't think Gasperini is essentially a very flexible, fluid coach. He has his way of playing, his formation, 3 at the back, like Ruben Amorim plays. A lot of teams in Italy play 3 at the back. But I think right now we don't have that same type of creativity and skill that we had when we had Papu and especially Josip Ilicic. So what we've been building over the last couple of seasons and the team that we're creating is a little bit more direct, probably a little bit less possession-based and a little bit more can counterattack a little bit more pace, a little bit more speed. What we also lack is the wing backs that were so key to Gianpiero Gasperini. I remember Robin Gosens scoring 11 goals from wing back, fullback. You know, that's kind of a crazy statistic. Hans Hatteboer, famously in that Champions League match against Valencia, having some amazing goals. So we're kind of changing our team a little bit and the style. The other thing that if you ask somebody about Atalanta, they'll tell you, if they were casual fans, didn't watch all the time, oh, they attack. Their defense, they don't care. They concede lots of goals. They play a high line. It's very different now. We're much more balanced.
The last game with Juventus ended 0-0.
0-0, yeah, right, exactly. And we snuffed out Juventus completely. Our problem right now is that we don't score goals. I don't say we don't score goals, but if you score a lot of goals, who cares how many you concede, right? No one cares. You're going to win, you're going to score a lot of goals. We can't do that anymore. We don't have that type of offense. But we've had a huge transfer window. We brought in a lot of attacking players and shored up our defense as well. So I think that we're a little bit more balanced in the way that we play. I'm really interested to see how we play against Sporting in Lisbon. It's going to be an interesting match because I think that we are a little bit more flexible in the way that we can play, creating chances. If you watch the game against Rakov, or even the game against Juventus, you see that we create chances, no problem. It's scoring goals that is the problem. So it really depends. We have our big signing, one of our big summer signings, Gianluca Scamacca. Some of you might know him. We did get him from West Ham. He's 1.95 meters, big Italian striker. We haven't had a central forward who can play like that in a long time. Been injured the last few games. He should be on the bench for Atalanta. We'll see if he plays. But scoring goals is going to be interesting for us. Creating chances, no problem. Scoring goals, maybe a little bit more problematic. But the big thing is the press. The high press is still there. Man-to-man marking on defense. All that stuff is still in the DNA of Atalanta. It's really more... We can be more conservative if we want to be.
Okay. So you think that Atalanta maybe will give more the ball to Sporting and play in the counter?
I think it can. I think that's the reason why I think Atalanta actually has a good chance of coming out with points against Sporting is because at home I think Sporting will want to play on the front foot. And depending on who's going to start, we might be able to play on the counter. Honestly, I think we have a good chance against Sporting just in general because of the similar style or the similar setup. The man marking that Atalanta does can be, it's very fastidious. Your center back will follow. So if it's Scalvini or Jim City, will follow Gyokeres everywhere he goes on the pitch. Same thing with any of the forwards. Paulinho, he'll probably be marked by Scalvini. He'll go everywhere. So when it's who your man mark is going to be with a very similar setup, I think it's a little bit easier for Atalanta to be able to. It just depends, I think, on maybe Martin Hjulmand. Martin Hjulmand is going to be, I think, a huge key for Sporting. But I think the counter, we won't mind playing against Sporting on the counter. I don't think you're going to see 65% possession for Sporting, 35% possession for Atalanta. I don't think so. That's not how we play. But I think Sporting will have more possession and Atalanta won't mind attacking on the counter.
Okay. I wanted to ask you, who do you think that is the key players of your club? So the big stars, who should Ruben Amorim be worried with?
I think right now we'll go straight up the middle of the team. I think I'm going to start with a guy who I think is just right now the real engine of the team, and that's Koopmeiners. Dutch player who's been, this is his third season with us, came much ballyhooed from AZ Alkmaar. This summer had offers interest from Liverpool, from Napoli, but chose to stay with Atalanta. Really, he is a central midfielder, deep-lying playmaker. But with this team, he tends to play what we would call a trequartista, or an attacking midfielder, whether it's on the left or the right or in the center, depending who the pairings are. But together with Ederson dos Santos in the middle, and of course Martin de Roon, who you talked about, those three midfielders are going to be key. And I think the way that those three play is going to be very key to how we play against Sporting, because Sporting tends to play with the two midfielders. And honestly, the way to beat Atalanta for me is to outnumber them in the midfield. That's the way to do it, so that they can't transition. You have an easy way to break their press. But I think Sporting plays attack. And so I think it's going to be about how Morten Hjulmand how he deals with that pressure, because I bet you it'll be Hjulmand and de Roon going at each other all game. It's going to be an exciting. Of course, I love Morten Hjulmand because he came from Serie A, came from Lecce. He is a player that if you asked any Atalanta player, what player in Serie A do you want on Atalanta, they would tell you Morten Hjulmand. So very big, I think, for Sporting to get such a great player. So that'll be a fun matchup between those two. Morten against Martin, I think that'll be a good one. But yeah, I think it's the midfield that's going to be the big key battle. And Ten Koopmeiners, can he be creative? He's a scoring midfielder as well. Can he get some shots from outside? So he's the key for the game to me.
Okay. So before we continue, I wanted to ask you about a player in particular that left Atalanta this summer. That is Demiral, because Demiral was from Sporting. He was a little bit underused here in Sporting, so we had a big talent center back. He was really good. Then he restarted his career at Turkey, then Sassuolo, Juventus, and Atalanta. And then he moved to Saudi Arabia this summer. So I wanted to ask you, how was the experience with Demiral?
I love Mary Demiral. Atalantini love Mary Demiral. He was perfect for how we played. He was aggressive. When he tackled, I remember a great tackle he had, I think, against Marcus Rashford in the Champions League. He celebrates tackles like he scores goals, like you scored a goal. So those are the types of center backs that you can't help but love. I think part of what was difficult with Mary Demiral was he came after we had Christian Romero. And we actually paid more for Mary Demiral than Christian Romero. We know how great Christian Romero has been at Spurs. I came through the same way from Juventus on loan, and then we sold him on. One of the things that is, I don't want to call it maddening or annoying, but is constant at Atalanta is, as much as we love our coach Gianpiero Gasperini, if he decides he doesn't like a player, he will not play them. And so clearly at the end of last season, you started seeing Demiral always on the bench, coming in, in the 80th minute. But I miss him. I miss him at his best. I think all Atalantini really loved him. He was a dynamic player. I just think it didn't go well with him. And then we had a little bit of drama with him the beginning of the season here, because we had one of our wingbacks, Joachim Maehle, who great Danish player, played much better for the Danish national team than Atalanta. He went to the Bundesliga with Wolfsburg, and he said some not nice things about the coach, Gianpiero Gasperini. And of course, it's just his experience with the coach, right? But the way that he said it, and then Mary Demiral, 100%, I agree with you, all these types of things. So I think now everybody has a little sourness for Mary Demiral after he agreed about these things. We love our coach. He's not a nice man, but he's our guy, and he's brought a lot of success. So I think that for me, I loved him as a player, but I think I'm a little bit soured on the experience at the end. So it's good for him, I think, to leave Atalanta.
Okay. I wanted to ask you, how important do you think that is your scouting system? Because Atalanta in the last few years has become kind of a reference on that department, and we see by, for example, the sale of Hojlund. That was a massive sale. Of course, that you lose a great player, but the money is very important too. Other names like Romero, Gozens, and other talent that you are capable of buying and then sell for a big value, kind of a Sporting.
Mm-hmm. Yep. They're very similar. I think part of that is in the 90s, there was a huge push to make a great youth system, first and foremost. The youth system is very important to Atalanta, always known as one of the best youth systems in Italy for sure, maybe even in Europe. And I think the scouting comes after that. Bergamo, like I said, is a small city, 120,000 inhabitants. And so Atalanta is not a rich team. So we have to be smart with our money and how we invest and where we look. That's why we tend to go to Eredivisie in Holland. We don't normally go to England, but I think a little bit of that is changing. We still probably will not go for any kind of big names in big leagues, but we are able to have enough money to buy players who are, like Scamacca for 30 million euros. It would never have happened before. El Bilal Touré from Almeria for 35 million euros. So obviously with more money, we're able to scout a little bit bigger, but I think the DNA of Atalanta will never change. We still need to go and find players in other leagues to get for a good deal. And then part of it, yes, is selling them on. Atalanta has never won an Italian league. We have one trophy for our senior, and that's the Italian Cup in 1963. We are not a team that wins trophies. I think in order for us to win things, I think it needs to change a little bit, that we need to keep some of those players. I think Hojlund going to Man United for 75, 80 million euros, you're never going to say no to that. We got 3 big players for the price of one. So I think that that's okay. But I think what you're seeing now is the change that somebody like Koopmeiners, who we got from AZ Alkmaar for 13 to 15 million euros, offered 45, 50 million euros. No, he's staying with us. So as that happens, as there's more money, the scouting network is still there, but I think it's more for the youth that are coming up as opposed to the first team.
Okay, really interesting. And last question, I would like to ask you, because you just said that in spite of your love for the manager, some Atalanta fans think that he is a difficult man. So do you think that having that continuity on the manager that brought you 3 times to the Champions League, I think, and some continue to that scouting project that you were explaining to, do you think that Atalanta can win silverware on the next years?
That's a tough question.
Or do you think that something needs to change? I don't know.
That's a really, really good question. So, I think this season and the next season will be the key. We've had a style of play with an era of players. You just talk about Ilicic, Gomez, and Zapata. Those 3. That's no longer the team. All those 3 are gone. So I think this is the second. I think maybe the new front 3 is going to be De Ketelaere, Scamacca, and Touré, let's say. So what we've seen is a transition. So I think these next couple of years with Gasperini is going to be the key. 2 years ago, we didn't even make Europe. So there was a question, were we going to keep him? Is it time? Ask me on a different day, I wouldn't tell you, but I don't know how to feel about us winning something or us losing Gasperini. I think a change eventually needs to happen. The days of having somebody, like Ferguson at Manchester United, those kind of long tenured coaches, it doesn't really happen anymore. Unless you're at the top level, even at the top level, like you look at Manchester City, you look at those types of teams that have had their coach for a long time, Liverpool. Is it time for a change? Sometimes I feel like it is. My biggest problem is tactically, I've wanted to see a change from Atalanta for a while. I feel like their team that they are building is not suited maybe to Gasperini's style. And maybe we're trying to put square pegs in round holes at this point. We have yet to see. They're building a club around what he wants. But if you ask me, is 3-4-1-2, 3-4-3, 3-4-2-1 the right formation for this club? I will tell you 1 million times no. I think we should play a 4-3-3. I think the width should come from our attackers, not our wingbacks. All those types of things. But what do I know? I'm just a fan, right? I'm just a fan. But
fans also have a voice. Yes.
Yeah, but I've been seeing it for a couple of years now, since our transition, and sometimes we play in a 4-3-3, and we do really, really well. But that's just my personal opinion. It depends on the day. But I think Gasperini needs this season and the next season to see what we can build. If nothing happens, I think it's time to go, buddy. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much for giving your opinion and for me to let you know a bit better and your project and your club. And yes, please, to our listeners, continue to listen to our episodes of Panenka's Europe. If you're English speakers and if you're Portuguese speakers, you can always see our content in Portuguese on Instagram, Twitter, and other platforms. Thank you so much, and have a nice day.
Thanks.
Liverpool 3-0. Corner taken quickly. Origi!
Está Hjulmand, Cristiano Ronaldo, vai embora Cristiano Ronaldo, mete, bateu, golo.
Balotelli, Aguero!
Posse de bola para Portugal, vai Éder, chuta!